Hi, and welcome to InfoSec Pros. I'm Kane, Field CISO at Hyperproof, and I'm joined today at RSA 2025 by Mark Lundin, partner at BDO. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, we were talking before we got started about some of the compliance challenges that organizations are seeing and some of the new certifications. Based on where you are, what are some of the new certifications or attestation requirements that you're seeing gain traction in 2025?
Well, there's a couple things that we're seeing a lot of. Obviously, with the rise of AI and all the hype and all the new applications and implementation, a lot of customers are asking for more information about how companies are managing AI security. And the ISO 42001 certification has really gained a lot of traction, especially in the tech industry. For some of these, it usually takes a little while for them to gain traction. But I'm already working with several large companies that are already going through the planning and then the certification process for this 42001 standard. And that it's gaining a lot of interest because it's an AI governance standard that really gets into the detail of what are the company's policies around the use of AI. Gets into how are they managing the risks associated with it, how are they handling systems development, change management, model management of all the data, dealing with the supply chain risks when there are other different providers in the mix. So it's a really helpful tool for companies to try to get ahead of the game and be able to proactively share some positive confirmation with their customers of how they're dealing with these issues.
Yeah, and I think we'll drop in the show notes as well. We had another person on from BDO on a webinar. I want to say that was Varun a couple months ago, and it was about ISO 42001. He dropped some really practical advice, and we'll make sure that I hope that our production team will be able to drop that in the show notes so that we can refer to that. But other than ISO 42001, what are some of the other popular frameworks or attestations or certifications that you're seeing come up these days?
I'd say the second one that's been around a little bit longer is the ISO 27701, the privacy information management system standard. For years, companies have gone through all sorts of security-focused audits and cybersecurity assessments, but there haven't been a lot of formal mechanisms to audit the effectiveness of privacy controls and privacy program controls. So particularly with larger tech companies, 27701, not to be confused with 2700,
27001, right?
has gained a lot of traction. And it's different in that it breaks out different requirements for data processors versus data controllers. It gets into details around privacy by design and other aspects like that.
Now, I've got to ask for ISO 27701, do you think that would help companies deal with some of the extraterritorial GDPR and associated issues coming out of the European Union, especially related to the use of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I think it's very complementary to 42001 for AI. But even when the standard was being developed, it was built with GDPR in mind. There's a mapping to GDPR within the body of the standard itself, and a lot of companies have they've used things like the NIST privacy risk management framework to help shape some of their internal processes and procedures. But a lot of companies are using 27701 sort of as the jumping off point to map to GDPR or other regional requirements. So,
and I can imagine for companies that aren't seeking an external attestation or certification like ISO would afford, are you seeing a lot of the new NIST privacy framework, which I just saw got a recent update? Are you seeing any interest in that in the market yet, or is it still predominantly looking for certifications and attestations?
It's a balance. I was just speaking at the IAPP conference last week with someone who was involved in producing the privacy risk management framework update, and there was definitely a lot of interest in it. A lot of people like that, and the cybersecurity framework and the AI risk management frameworks from NIST. They're all very complementary and use similar phases and terminology. So, yeah, from an internal compliance and risk management perspective, that it certainly gets a lot of interest.
That's fantastic. And those are some of the compliance things that you're seeing
Yeah,
on privacy and security.
yeah.
What challenges are those addressing? Like, why would a company, especially a large company, like, why would they choose? What are the challenges that they're facing beyond compliance that would drive them to go after some of these? Because I recognize they are challenging to get and they take a while and they require substantial investment. Are there any business challenges you're seeing systemically?
I mean, from a business perspective, it's largely driven by their customers and business partners and regulators needing to do something that's going to address the things that they're asking about, the things that they're requiring, and so forth. And using frameworks like that, those are going to align pretty well with whatever type of framework a customer may be using as they're, dealing with vendor risk or supply chain risk.
All right. So you're probably seeing this come up in contracts, for example.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely coming up more and more. I mean, for years, from an ISO perspective, you mostly saw 27001 for companies that were dealing with customers in Europe and Asia. Um, but more recently, it's one standard after another. Whether it's business continuity or privacy or AI governance or quality management or IT service management, there's been a lot of growth in the requirements for those.
And just as for the CISOs who are watching this, who are looking at this alphabet soup of potential acronyms that they're going to go try and get funding for, what are some of the things that they can use to justify that investment beyond just the compliance trap, which I think some of us have fallen into of like, we get into checkbox compliance. What are some of the business outcomes that you're seeing from a positive perspective of investing in getting an external attestation like an ISO?
I think to take a step back, for a company that's dealing with customers in a lot of different industries that whether it concerns around all those different topics, whether it's security, privacy, resiliency, and so forth, they need to have a good program, a good structure in place. Oftentimes referred to as a common control framework, and if they're dealing with a lot of personal information or business, enterprise customers, their customers' personal information, then they've got a lot of requirements around privacy, whether that's contractual or otherwise, and if they don't already have something in place, or if they haven't already defined a very clear structure, a standard like 27701, or NIST risk management framework gives them a good foundation to build on, and then they can fine tune that and add to it, with the delta as a new requirement or a country specific requirement comes along.
So, just on that note, actually, what's your advice to companies that are working multinationally when dealing with privacy regs? Because I think that previously we used to say, well, GDPR was the gold standard. We're going to work with that. I know that California, where we're currently at RSA 2025, is doing some stuff too. Do you think that there's going to be a bifurcation in compliance programs related to privacy where companies try to effectively manage divergent control requirements across multiple jurisdictions? Or are we going to see a consolidation method, much like we saw with GDPR, where they said, well, this is the gold standard, we're going to work towards that?
I think in most cases it's just not practical to operate different ways, or tailor the processes and procedures to the different geographies. You really have to just what's the high watermark that's going to cover each of those jurisdictions you're dealing with in a significant way. And I think we see a mix of GDPR requirements and 27701, and maybe the NIST privacy risk management framework sprinkled in as sort of the baseline that they work off of. And as a new state requirement comes along or a regional requirement comes along, you have to look at, well, what's really different about it? Are there different incident response timeframes or different deletion requirements? You can really narrow in on what's different about it.
All right, and just as to take a step further back and talk about the broader market, there have definitely been trends that have come and gone in terms of influences for compliance. I
Yeah.
think that artificial intelligence right now is still sucking a lot of the air out of the room, and it's driving a lot of conversations about compliance requirements. But
Yeah.
what are some of the other, like the other one that comes to mind is supply chain trends. But are there any other global trends that you're seeing that are driving compliance growth at companies?
I think the things that are driving additional work and effort for particularly for technology companies from a compliance perspective, it's really a combination of all those technology changes with AI being the biggest one right now. It's customers being more aggressive from a vendor management perspective and taking a strong position that they really want certain audits or certifications. um it's all the changing technology, changing threats from a security and technology perspective. I think all of those things are feeding into it. So companies, they're dealing with the need to continue to innovate and incorporate new technologies, roll out new products and functionality. At the same time, their organizations are changing, and they just got more and more requirements. So there's a lot they need to do from a people, process, and technology perspective. Making sure they've got the right compliance organization structure in place to deal with it, whether it's highly centralized or more decentralized. Um, you having good processes in place to mature their controls, refresh their controls, and not have them just get stale and not keep up with all the changes that are occurring in their environments. And then having good technology in place to automate what they can from a compliance and monitoring, as well as security, privacy, resiliency perspective. And just in help use technology to try to standardize things, because there's so much. It's very dynamic for most of these companies.
And I love that perspective you have on being able to automate a lot of those routine tasks that otherwise I don't think anybody here on the show floor, except for maybe four people, gets excited about collecting evidence,
Right.
right? Especially if you're in the SecOps team. That is not what you got into this industry for. And yet we're asking them consistently, like, hey, go get me a screenshot of an Excel file of a PDF to prove that we're compliant with the thing. Or, hey, can you spend 2 weeks of your life filling out this security questionnaire as opposed to doing control operation? Is that something that you're seeing drive any market change in terms of how companies are thinking about their governance structures so that they can actually retain staff as opposed to boring them to death with requests that just don't feel in their bailiwick?
Yeah, I mean, with all of these requirements and pressures, it just puts more and more of a burden on the engineering teams and technical teams. So they do want to simplify that and automate whatever they can. And failure is not an option. They have to meet all these requirements, or it has a very negative impact on enterprise customers or regulatory situations, or what have you. So a lot of companies, they're working hard to try to streamline their processes, whether it's manual processes, or using automation and other tools to simplify the pieces that are more repeatable than not.
And for those organizations that are in a manual control operation, manual control auditing, manual space for responding to security questionnaires, what's the guidance you'd give them at this point? Because none of this stuff is new, right? I mean, we've had the ability to collect evidence automatically at scale for years. We've had automated ways of filling out security questionnaires as part of a sales cycle. For those people who are on the fence of looking at automation, what would you say to them?
I think there's two stages to it. The first stage is really taking a hard look at your controls and very clearly defining them and making sure you're aligned with all the different standards and requirements, and what's a hard requirement versus something that's nice to have, and try to lock that down in place. And then you can clearly identify, well, which business unit, which process owners are responsible for each of those areas, and figure out, well, how do we want to manage the compliance element of that. Once you've got that really well thought out and standardized, then you can take the time to invest. Hey, can we use a tool to capture these very specific configurations, or to facilitate these monthly or quarterly reviews? Because the environments are changing too. So if you lock that down first, that puts you in a good place to really figure out, well, where can we gain efficiency and save time, and have better internal monitoring and early warnings. Are there other issues in this particular area? If you jump too quickly and, oh, we're just going to automate it, and then all the controls change every 6 months or every 12 months, then you're just creating more work for yourself. But a methodical approach like that can really have some benefits.
And I love that you're identifying the business unit owners or the divisional owners who should be owning those controls.
Yeah.
Personal opinion here, and you can maybe reflect on this, maybe not. I think that in a 3 lines of defense model, the office of the CISO right now is operating as first line. I think that companies that are doing this at scale effectively, the office of the CISO becomes second line. For those of you who don't know, the 3 lines of defense, briefly: control operation, control audit, and then external attestation and validation that they're doing the things that they said they're going to do. That's a quick paraphrase. But
Yeah.
do you think that's going to be where we move to, where CISOs are going to stop owning all the IT risk, and that'll get distributed effectively throughout the business so that they can make informed risk-based decisions on how they should operate their controls?
Yeah, I see a lot of different models. So, in some organizations, the CISO is taking a higher level security risk view of things, and some of the more operational and compliance risks may be managed at a line of business or functional business unit level. And I see more and more of that, because with some of these organizations, they have so many different product teams, engineering teams, environments, that you really need a mix of both: the big picture view that's proactively looking at new threats, new risks, and so forth, and then others that are more day-to-day tactical.
Fantastic. Well, I really love that perspective, and also some of the advice you've shared about taking that approach and not trying to do everything all at once, but identifying small areas for wins and
Yeah.
progressively improving and not automating stuff that you can't explain. Is
Right.
that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely want to move in pieces and have it work successfully here, and then you can replicate that out to other functional areas or other business units.
Fantastic. Well, with that, Mark, I want to thank you for being on the show today. And if you're watching this at home, or if you're watching this at YouTube and you're thinking, hey, I know somebody who should be on that show, or hey, I'm the person who should be on that show, reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me, or just email me. And with that, Mark, I want to thank you for joining me at RSA 2025. It was an absolute pleasure having you on today's episode.
All right, thank you. It was a pleasure.